Hi global students, welcome to your next video lesson all about classical Greece. I'm here with my dog Oliver. Ollie, say hi. Not Bluey in the background. We're just hanging out on the couch. The neighbor's dogs are going crazy next door, so I hope you can't hear them. Anyway, let's talk classical Greece. Before we get into the history of the classical civilization in Greece, let's talk a little bit about geography. There are several geographic features that apply to Greece and have impacted its history. The civilization of classical Greece that we'll be studying is located on a peninsula. Today, this peninsula is referred to as the Balkan Peninsula. A peninsula is a piece of land that is surrounded by water on three sides. But Greece is not just a peninsula. It's also made up of many islands. Regions that are made up of so many islands that there's like a group of them or a chain of islands is called an archipelago. On the eastern side of the Balkan Peninsula, Greece is bordered by the Aegean Sea. On the western side, it's bordered by the Mediterranean Sea. Because of these geographic features and being so close to the water, Grecians are going to learn how to use the seas to their advantage. They're going to use the Mediterranean Sea to connect with trade and travel to other continents. Greece will also develop a really strong navy, meaning that they can fight wars and defend themselves on the sea. Now, the terrain in Greece, the land itself, is actually very mountainous. Mountains can be good for defense, but it also makes it difficult to farm. In fact, overall, the land in Greece is actually pretty poor in natural resources. So they are going to rely on those seas to trade and get what they need from other civilizations. Another important effect that mountains had on Greece's history was that it divided the civilization into many different groups. Greece was not one united country or empire at the time we're studying. There were many, many small groups of Greeks living all over the peninsula and on the islands. These areas became known as city-states, or the Greek word for it is polis. Each polis or city-state had its own unique culture, its own unique government, although there were some common things that linked these city-states together, like language, for example. There are two city-states that we are going to learn about a little more in depth, and we will focus on to show you just how different these city-states could be. They are called Athens and Sparta. Let's start with Athens. Probably the most important fact that you should remember about Athens is that this is the place where the form of government, democracy, begins. Democracy is a type of government where the citizens have a say in who is the leader. There's no mandate of heaven. There's no divine right theory. It's not hereditary or handed down through the king's family from generation to generation. The citizens get to cast a vote to decide who their leader will be. Now, democracy in Athens doesn't look exactly the way democracy looks today. In Athens, during the classical period, only free men who were born in Athens were eligible to vote. Sorry, ladies. Slaves, you can't vote either. Now, like I mentioned, women had very few rights in ancient Athens. They could not vote. They could not own land. But believe it or not, there was some level of education that was provided to the women. Girls were expected to be educated like the boys were in Athens, but not to the same extent. Girls focused on things that were more domestic, maybe a trade like weaving, some kind of craft. They learned dancing, gymnastics, music. Let's talk about our next city-state, Sparta. When you think of Sparta, I want you to immediately think of the word warrior. The entire culture of Sparta revolved around warfare. When boys turned 7 years old, the government in Sparta took them away from their families and put them into a boot camp, essentially. They went right into military training. This military training was extremely intense. Spartans trained in the worst conditions, so they were prepared for the worst conditions in a battle. They had very little food. They would sleep directly on the ground, no beds or mats. Of course, they did a lot of physical training too. They wanted big, strong soldiers. Strength was so valued in Sparta that if a baby was born and it was sick, they would be left on a mountainside somewhere to die. No sick babies allowed in ancient Sparta. To strengthen their army, Sparta also discouraged any form of individualism. It was all about the team and working together in a group to win the battle. Something interesting about Sparta is that for their government system, they had not one but 2 kings. A Spartan soldier was expected to stay in the military until age 60. Now, as for the women in Sparta, they had an important role. While they were not soldiers themselves, they were expected to have babies who would become soldiers. The more sons, the better. The women were also expected to be physically fit to get them through childbirth and to help train their sons become strong soldiers. As you can see, the 2 city-states of Athens and Sparta were very different culturally, even though they developed on the same Greek peninsula. Let's hop back over to the city-state of Athens. There are some other really important developments to come out of classical Athens during this time period. In fact, Athens experiences a golden age. Congratulations, Athens. This golden age was ushered in by a leader named Pericles. Pericles is known for being a politician. He's also known for being a really great speaker, or another word for that is orator. But Pericles has another claim to fame, and that is being a really brilliant general. Pericles had helped lead Athens to a really big victory against the Persian Empire. After proving how dominant Athens could be in battle, they formed something called the Delian League. This was a union of Greek city-states who agreed to fight together against any other outside empires. Under Pericles' leadership, Athens becomes really strong and dominant and is able to turn into a really wealthy empire. During this golden age, we see developments in architecture. Athenians use the column as not just an architectural feature for beauty, but also because it's strong. In fact, in some of the ruins from classical Greece, you can still see these columns supporting buildings that are thousands and thousands of years old. Athens also sees major developments in the arts. The sculptures that archaeologists have found from this time period are much more lifelike than they were in the past. They'll have very realistic poses. The great writer Homer creates great works of literature and even theater. The Iliad and the Odyssey are 2 pieces of literature you will probably come into contact with at some point in your high school or college career. We have developments in mathematics like the Pythagorean theorem, for example. Advancements in medicine. Athens also produces the world's most famous philosophers. A philosopher is a person who studies life, learning, and the world in general. Philosophers like to try and answer those big questions in life. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? 3 of the most famous philosophers to come out of classical Greece are Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. To close out the period of classical Greek history, we come to Alexander the Great. The term great is subjective, but we'll discuss this more in class. Alexander the Great started out as just a prince of King Philip of Macedon. Now, this was an empire that was kind of just north of where classical Greece is located. After his father dies and he rises to power, he's able to expand the Macedonian Empire. He's able to include parts of Africa. In fact, Egypt becomes part of Alexander the Great's empire. It spans all the way east as far as modern-day Pakistan. Alexander's claim to fame is being a great general. He knew he was pretty great. In fact, several of the cities that he conquered, he named after himself. Alexandria. He even named one city after his favorite horse. One of Alexander the Great's most important contributions to global history is the development of something called Hellenistic culture. Because his empire expanded across several continents, there was a mix and a blending of the cultures from those different continents into something new, which we call Hellenistic culture. You'll see elements of ancient Greece mixed with the culture of Africa, in Egypt, for example, or in Asia. We call this mixing and blending of cultures cultural diffusion. The period of classical Greece is said to have come to an end with the death of Alexander. His death is a mystery, too. We really don't know whether he was killed, poisoned, or just died of illness. It's one of history's mysteries. Okay, that's all I've got for this introduction to classical Greece. We'll talk more about the details in class.